Hello there, Brick Fanatics. Have you ever looked at LEGO Bumblebee and said to yourself, yes, alright, but I wonder how it would look if it were a bit more Michael Bay-ish? Well, wonder no longer. Autobots, let's roll out. Still trying to figure out the best way to hold this thing. This is a 2018 Bumblebee alternate build for the Bumblebee LEGO set, available on Rebrickable by Ransom Fern. And I've got to say, if you are a fan of this particular design of Bumblebee, then this is a brilliant alternate build for the classic traditional LEGO Bumblebee. First things first, it is important to point out this thing doesn't transform. So technically, it's not a Transformer. I mean, it is because it's based on a Transformers character, but this does not transform. I mean, yes, it does, because you can take all of the pieces apart and put them together in whatever shape you want, but that is the same as any LEGO set. What I mean is that unlike the actual design for the Bumblebee LEGO set, which can be manipulated and shifted and twisted and turned to turn between a robot and a car, this one will not turn into a Chevrolet Camaro as Bumblebee does in the Michael Bay films. Or indeed, because this is supposed to be based on the Bumblebee standalone film from 2018, he should turn into a little Volkswagen Bug, the same as the actual LEGO set does, but he also just doesn't, because that's not what this build is supposed to do. And before you finish writing those comments, yes, I know that Michael Bay did not direct the Bumblebee film that this is intended to be based off of. It's just fun to play up the Michael Bay angle, because if I said, oh, I wish that Bumblebee looked a little bit more Travis Knight-esque, you wouldn't necessarily care as much. And yes, it's a bit of a cliche to play into that stereotype that says that all Michael Bay films are just filled with explosions and propaganda for the US military. But it's really funny to do that, so I've done it anyway. Anyway, the build itself. So first off, I built this thing in the traditional design that comes in the box, in the instructions, the one that LEGO expects you to build. And I think that that one is perfectly fine. It is not the world's most groundbreaking build, but it is also not overly challenging. It is not overly difficult. It does what it says on the box, and what it says on the box is it transforms, and otherwise it's a pretty cool robot or it's a pretty cool car. I ended up preferring it in the Volkswagen Bug form, if only because it was easier to put on a shelf that way. The robot form of that actual design that is in the box is a little bit like a stick figure that's just got really comically large hands and feet. Like, there's not much to his torso there, and I appreciate that that is a limitation of trying to adapt, first off, a cartoon series that was never really thought through in terms of how this character was supposed to be fleshed out in actual physical form, and also a toy which was very, very small and didn't have an awful lot of detail in there. So I think for what it is attempting to be, the official version of this LEGO set is just absolutely fine. It is decent. I think the only challenge that I have with it is that the transforming process is really tedious and really fiddly and quite nerve-wracking, because this thing is made up with these... Because this thing is made up with these chunky, clicky joints which go click, 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 and just need a little bit of pressure for you to move them. And especially when you're trying to transform that LEGO Bumblebee, it's quite nerve-wracking because you don't know how much pressure you're supposed to put in to click those gears or click those joints, and how much of that clicking noise is actually just you breaking the LEGO set, because I don't think LEGO is really the perfect medium for a transformer, for the reason that any piece of it could come flying off at any second if you put too much pressure in the wrong point. To that end, I'm not particularly sad to lose the transforming element in turning this into the film Bumblebee. There's also the other side of it, which is that I don't think the instructions make it particularly clear how to actually transform that build. And even though there is a YouTube video, which is from the LEGO group, it goes through things very quickly, and I felt myself having to pause and tap back and watch it again to try and figure out what I was actually supposed to do. And that does really get in the way of the fun of transforming a Transformer, where if you think of the actual Hasbro toys, which are not made of a construction block toy that will just fall apart, it's a lot more tactile and fun, and everything feels a lot more satisfying, and I don't feel like you quite get that with the LEGO build in the same way. So anyway, here we are with film accurate Bumblebee. He's got a hand that you can put on him instead, but otherwise here he's got this little kind of little thing here. I believe it is a gun of some sorts, because that's just how the Transformers in the films roll. And then you've got the lovely head here, which you can move these bits around and give him a little face mask as well, and that is quite neat too. But otherwise, this is a build which I would really recommend you put on your shelf and you leave it there. It has a lot of the trappings of a traditional mock from a very seasoned and experienced LEGO fan designer who isn't necessarily worried about the set being quite as sturdy, quite as play-oriented, and quite as easy to put together as one that you might get from an official LEGO designer. To that end, you will find this build a bit more challenging than the vanilla Bumblebee. It's going to be a little bit more tricky to put together. It's also going to be incredibly frustrating if you are trying to turn this from the official build into this mock, because you're going to have to take apart every single piece and put it all back together again, and you're going to be scrabbling around looking for the right piece because none of them are in the correct bags, etc, etc. This is standard stuff for anybody who's ever done like a rebrickable thing in the past. It's just worth bearing in mind if you have got Bumblebee and you think, oh, I'll just casually turn it into the other Bumblebee by use of the instructions that I can get off Rebrickable. It is going to be just a little bit more work than building a LEGO set fresh. It might just be that I highlight that point because for me, like 90% of the joy of a LEGO set is in its first construction, and the moment that I have to take it apart and put it back together again, I just find it so tedious. So bear in mind that that just might be my personal predilection. There are, with this build, a lot more pieces that are not entirely anchored. They go together quite well, and I'd been concerned, picking this thing up and manipulating it and moving it around, I'd been concerned that pieces were going to start flying off, because it does have that Michael Bay Transformers look of being something that's like you've just taken a lump of Play-Doh and then just dipped it in the Lego box and picked up a bunch of stuff. You know, it's covered with details that are very Michael Bay Transformers, and so you don't think it's going to be all that sturdy, especially where you've got pieces that are kind of hanging off a little bit. But actually, I've not had an issue with anything popping off of this thus far, and I cannot say the same for a lot of actual official LEGO builds. So kudos to Ransom Fern for designing this in such a way where it looks a lot more flimsy than it actually is. This thing is actually decently sturdy. That said, I would not recommend this build for play. This is not going to hold up to any kind of rigorous manipulation and moving. You can move some joints, you can move things around, and it's going to be okay. But as soon as you start like bashing it against other things, it's going to end up falling apart, because that's just the nature of the beast. Bear in mind that the instructions for this thing are readily available on Rebrickable. They are not free. They cost $10 US plus whatever fees your personal bank is going to charge you, especially if you're moving through different exchange rates and different currencies, etc. It's not an amount of money that breaks the bank, but it is just something to bear in mind. I definitely feel like I got $10 US plus the fees I got charged worth of entertainment out of this second build, and that's coming from someone who, as said, doesn't really love to take a LEGO set apart and put it back together again. Make sure, by the way, that if you are looking to purchase LEGO Bumblebee or any other LEGO set, that you use the affiliate links in the description or the QR code that is currently on screen. They take you straight to the LEGO website, and we get a little bit of the percentage of the sale when you make that purchase through those links. Doesn't cost you a penny extra, but it helps to keep the lights on at Brick Fanatics. Make sure that you do all of the YouTube things. You know the drill by now. Leave a comment down below, give us a thumbs up, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, go to brickfanatics.com for coverage of all things LEGO, and make sure that you sign up to our newsletter so that you never miss anything LEGO related ever again. Thank you very much for watching, and have a wonderful day. Let's roll out! Really quickly, P.S. I gotta say, I put this thing on the shelf and I've just been looking at it, giving it the shelf treatment, and I cannot lie, this thing is a really nice display piece, and I don't think I ever really thought that about the previous version of Bumblebee when I had that on the shelf. So, quite aside from anything else, this thing looks good on the shelf, which is something that you would hope for from a LEGO set.